So to start, we go to Elementor, My Templates, and Add New Template. I'll choose Header from the drop-down. It's a header template we want to build. The name can be Header. No need to get fancy. Click Create Template. Now, it's totally possible to build our header from scratch, but Elementor gives us the choice here of choosing one of Elementor's pre-built blocks, which are just pre-designed templates we can just insert into the page. See, we're automatically in the header category of blocks here. Well, let's make our lives easy and just choose this one. It's just a logo and a nav, which is really simple. So I'll click Insert. Notice in the editor, this content below the header itself. Elementor is trying to be helpful here by showing you the rest of the site so that you can design your header against it. Now, we're going to be replacing all of this stuff, so just ignore it. Now, before we look at anything else, remember in the last lesson, the setup, I told you I was going to set Elementor to use my custom Typekit font as its default font for headings and body text. I couldn't set that in the themes customizer because using Typekit this way is an Elementor feature specifically. So we set that global default font over here in the top left-hand menu when you're in Elementor's editor. And weirdly, you can't set this unless you're editing something in Elementor's editor like we are here. I think it'd be better to set up all this stuff in Elementor's main settings. Anyway, if I click default colors, notice these are disabled. I disabled those in the last lesson in Elementor settings, if you remember. I want the default colors set in the customizer. That's fine. But in default fonts, as I mentioned, I usually disable Elementor's global fonts as well, but I want to set my Typekit font, Filson Soft, as my default font throughout Elementor. So under each of these, I'll set the font, Filson Soft, and the font weight for headings and text. And then apply. And that will now set this font as the font for any headings and text widgets I add, though I can override that per widget if I like. Okay, with that done, now we can get on with the header. So this is just a standard section with 3 columns. This is the site logo widget. That pulls in the site logo automatically. If you remember, we added that in the customizer in the last lesson. Oh, it needs a little bit of styling attention. It's really tiny right now. We'll get that sorted. In this column is the nav menu widget. Now, if I click on it, notice over in the nav menu widget settings, it's already set the menu to use here as primary. You remember that's the menu I made in the last lesson. And it's chosen that one because it's the only one we have. Then we have a third tiny column here with a search icon. Okay, well, I mentioned I won't be showing you every single step, so I'm going to carry on tweaking this a little bit now, but I'll fast forward the video to after I've done it and then quickly talk you through. Oh, hi again. Here's what I did. Firstly, in the section itself, I added 30 pixels padding, top and bottom, and left and right. Padding is space inside things, so this padding gives a bit of breathing room inside the header itself. The 30 pixels left and right is especially important on small screens. The logo, I set alignment left. I set it to be the full-size image. Then in style, I set the width in pixels to how wide I wanted this SVG logo. The nav menu, I just played around a little bit with colors, a little bit of spacing between the items, the size of the text. Really nothing special. Then in the third column, I actually deleted the search icon and replaced it with a button widget. Now, eye tracking studies of website users show that their eyes tend to scan left from the logo all the way to the right at the top of the screen first, and then down into the content like a Z shape or a Z shape. So I've placed our main call to action right there on the right at the top. So it's one of the first things people see. I made it a button, so it's obvious that it's important and clickable, and I made it this orange color. Now, I've chosen that because it's a directly contrasting color to the green used on the rest of the site. It's actually opposite the green on the color wheel, so it really stands out from everything else. I also used the responsive preview controls just to make sure it all looks good on tablet and mobile. I'm not going to go through exactly what I did here, but I just changed some text sizes here and there, messed a little bit with a few of the column widths, clicking on the column settings. And on mobile, I just changed the column widths so that the third column drops underneath. So I set the 2 columns at the top to be so wide, the third column doesn't have enough room. Now, the button was already set to be aligned right on desktop anyway. And the way it works in Elementor, any style settings that you make higher up on bigger screens, like desktop, for example, those settings trickle down to the smaller screens too. Meaning what you set in desktop affects tablet and mobile, and then what you set in tablet specifically affect mobile as well. And then when you're in tablet or mobile mode, you can override any of those if you wish. Okay, back to desktop view. One last thing to do, we need to make it clear in the HTML code for this header that this is in fact a header. So in the section settings, under HTML tag, set header. And that'll wrap this whole template in a header HTML tag. Oh, and ready? We need to publish this template. So I'll hit publish. Now we're asked to set the display conditions, which means where across the site do we want this header template to appear. I'll click add condition. The default entire site is absolutely fine for this. That's what we want. And I'll hit publish. Now this header will replace our theme's default header across the entire site. And now we can edit that header in one place at any time in Elementor's template library. Okay, now let's move to the footer. Now it's the exact same idea as the header, but this time with the footer builder instead. Here's what it'll look like when it's done. So again, in Elementor My Templates, this time under the footer tab, I'll add new footer. I'll give it a name. Footer will do. Pick Create Template. Again, we're first presented with the option of using one of Elementor's pre-built blocks. This time, these are footer templates. None of these are really what I have in mind for the footer, so in this case, I'll just start from scratch. So I'll click the X to close this window down. Again, the main page content is here, just so that we can design the footer along with it. Elementor's trying to be helpful. And we create the footer down here at the bottom. Big surprise. Now our footer will be 3 columns, so I'll click Add New Section, and then choose 3 columns. First thing, I'll give this footer a background color in Section Settings, Style, Background, and I'll just choose the color from our palette. Now while we're in Section, in Advanced, set some padding. Now always remember, padding is space inside things, so padding is space inside this section. Margins are always space outside. I'll do 30 pixels top and bottom, and I'll do 30 pixels left and right as well. And left and right padding is important because it gives nice breathing room at the sides on small screens. And I'll actually use that same 30 pixels left and right padding in almost every section I add to this site, just so that there's consistent space on small screens down the sides. Now those values trickle down to tablet and mobile too, unless we need to specifically override them. We'll see. Now I'll add the content to these columns. And the headings and text in this footer will all be white to stand out against this dark background. Now here's a little trick. Instead of setting a white color on every individual heading and text widget that I'm about to add, which is fine but a bit laborious, instead click on the section settings for this entire section. Then under Style and Typography, set the white heading and text color in the section settings instead. I'll also set a nice bright link color here too. That way, you only need to set the colors for the headings and the text and the links once for the entire section, and all the headings and text widgets you add to this section will inherit those colors. They'll all be white by default. You can, of course, override that on a per widget basis if you like. Okay, again, I'll add the various content widgets to this footer now, but fast forward past me building it. We're not doing every single step in this module. So I've just added some heading widgets and text widgets, very straightforward. This logo is actually an image widget, it's just another SVG. This time it's a white version of the logo. This is an Elementor form. Now in truth, next to no one will sign up for just news. It's really not very compelling, but we can fix that later in the course. And this for now is just an image of these icons. And it's always nice to have accreditations and logos like this. It adds trust and credibility to the site. Although these are, of course, completely fictional logos. I also added a new section under this first one. I actually just cloned the first one so that it inherited the same padding and typography colors. Then I deleted 2 of the columns, which we don't need. We only need 1. And I added a simple text editor widget. I put in copyright and links to the privacy policy and terms and conditions. Every site should have those. One last thing. Like I did with the header, let's make it clear in the HTML for this footer that this is in fact a footer. So in the section settings for this bottom section, the one containing the copyright info, under HTML tag, set footer. That'll wrap this section with the copyright and privacy info in a footer HTML tag. And it's that last bit that's technically the footer in terms of HTML code, not all this other info. Now we're ready to publish this footer too, and it's the same process as the header. We'll click publish. Then add condition, leave that at the entire site, that's what we want, and publish. Now our header and footer design will be at the top and bottom of each page of the site.